Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I would like to make one central point. There's basically just one point I'm gonna make throughout the entire video. And that point is all about a number. More specifically, it is about a ratio. And so the ratio is between these two numbers. So this is a little exercise that you can try for yourself. Firstly, count how much time in the last 7 days you have spent consuming stuff. Screen time is a good proxy for this. How much time have you spent consuming stuff that has been created by other people? And then once you've done that, you want to estimate how much time you have spent creating something yourself. Now you calculate your creation to consumption ratio. And according to the internet, the average person spends about 28 hours a week consuming stuff created by other people and only around 2 hours a week doing their own acts of creation. That leads to a consumption to creation ratio of like 14:1, which is totally fine if that's how you want to live your life. But the people who follow this channel, people in my audience, I suspect you have goals that are beyond just being a professional consumer of things. I suspect your goals maybe involve freedom to some degree. You'd like the freedom to live on your own terms. Maybe you'd like financial freedom. Maybe you'd like time freedom. Maybe you'd like the ability to choose what you do for work. And my hot take in this video is that if you have any goal that is related to freedom, and that goal is something that the masses do not accomplish, then you really want to be shifting your ratio of creation to consumption more in favor of creation than consumption. i.e., you should be spending at least as many hours of the week creating stuff as you spend consuming stuff. Ideally, even more creating stuff than you do consuming stuff. So what does creating stuff mean? I don't mean you have to be a YouTuber, although creating videos and sticking them on the internet does count as creation. You could be making anything, you could be producing anything, you could be building stuff, you could be using your head, you could be using your hands, you could be using your brain, you could be using your skills, you could be using any of this sort of stuff to make something and put it into the world, something that didn't exist before. Oh, by the way, quick thing. If you happen to be watching this before the 1st of August, 2025, then for 6 weeks, from the 1st of August through to the 12th of September, 2025, me and my team are hosting a live 6-week challenge called the 1K Challenge. And the whole idea behind the 1K Challenge is that it's a 6-week live online course and bootcamp to help you make your first $1,000 on the internet. It's a challenge that we've designed for complete beginners to entrepreneurship, to side hustles, to making money. And you'll be doing this live with people from all around the world who are also at that same stage as you. So if that sounds good and you would like to make your first $1,000 on the internet and you'd like to learn the skills and actually take action through the format of this live online bootcamp, then there is a link to sign up in the video description. If you look at the examples of a lot of successful people, like actually, you know what, forget about how you define success, just like pick anyone that you look up to. Chances are a big part of the reason you look up to them is because of the stuff they have produced or created. It is very unlikely to be because of the stuff that they've consumed. If you look at a very large number of successful entrepreneurs, a lot of them built random stuff when they were in school or university or in their 30s before they started their main business. And as I said, the main point of this video is that if you are trying to work towards freedom, you really want to be spending more hours a week creating than you do consuming. I'm not trying to tell anyone what to do. You can live your life however you want. You can do whatever you want. But when I speak to people in my audience at events and workshops and stuff, and they have goals that are around freedom, like financial freedom or time freedom or location freedom or freedom of choice or freedom of creative expression or like freedom of anything, like freedom to not have to do shit you don't want to do and the ability to do stuff that you actually want to do. That is, it's worth recognizing that that is a top 1% goal, right? Only like 1% of the people in the world actually have the freedom, probably less than that actually have the freedom to just not do stuff they don't want to do and the freedom to do stuff that they want to do. I suspect for you, you're probably not trying to get like mega rich. You're probably not trying to become like a Dubai boy, billionaire, super yacht kind of lifestyle, but you'd probably like to have more money in your life, right? You'd like to have more money and you'd like to make that money in a more flexible and freeing way than you're currently doing. The problem is, if you have the consumption ratio that most people have, you're just not going to get there. It's probably not going to happen because the only way you work towards that kind of freedom, whether you're doing it through your own business or you're doing it through a career that's sufficiently flexible, is by creating value for other people. And then that's how money is made. Like you create value for other people and then they give you money for the value that you are creating. There is almost no one in the world who makes a good amount of money from consuming stuff. Also, it's not just about money, right? Like freedom is a clear goal of a lot of people in my audience, but also fulfillment. Like we also want to be fulfilled. And if you look at the stats and like the data on this, and also just like think about your own experience, what are the sorts of activities that are more likely to lead you to feeling fulfilled? How fulfilled do you really feel after you binge TikTok or Instagram Reels for a few hours? How fulfilled do you really feel when you have binged a whole season of something on Netflix? It can be sometimes nice, right? Especially if you're doing it with like loved ones, it kind of feels a little bit connecting some of the time. But for the most part, if you look at what people say in the surveys and in the studies around this, the things that disproportionately create fulfillment for human beings are creative activities rather than consumptive activities. Creating stuff and connecting with others tends to be the thing that makes us fulfilled. So even if you're like, this guy, I don't care about money, it's like, Okay, but you probably care about fulfillment, and that will probably come more naturally to you and more readily if you shift your consumption ratio in favor of creating rather than consuming. And speaking of creating more than consuming, one of my absolute favorite tools that I use pretty much every day to help me create more than consume is Claude from Anthropic, who are very kindly sponsoring this video. Claude is the incredibly thoughtful AI conversational partner designed by Anthropic. And of all of the different AI tools, all of the different large language models out there, all of the ones that you've heard of and you haven't heard of, I've tried pretty much all of them, and Claude is the one that I keep coming back to because I personally think it's the best one out there. The reason why I think Claude is better than ChatGPT and all of the other sort of competitor LLMs is because its personality is really, really thoughtful, and it's like having a very intelligent, honest, sort of genuinely deep thinking conversational buddy to sort of bounce ideas with back and forth. So for me, the way that I personally use it is I start off all of my sort of creation for YouTube videos and newsletters and whatever using the app VoicePal. So I'll go for a walk, I'll speak into VoicePal to get an initial transcript of whatever I'm thinking about. And then I will put that transcript into Claude, and then Claude will understand the essence of what I'm trying to say based on the original transcript. And I can ask it to give me really thoughtful opinions, distilling the essence of what I've said. And that really helps me think in different directions. And generally I find that by going back and forth with Claude, it massively improves the quality of the ideas that I'm thinking about, whether it relates to content that we're creating or strategy or product design or anything like that. And yeah, what I really love about Claude is that the experience feels very nice, it feels very collaborative. So if you haven't yet tried out Claude, there is a link in the video description for you to try it out completely for free. So thank you so much, Claude and Anthropic, for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to it. Now, one of the crucial points is that it's not just about consuming entertainment. It's also about consuming education. So a lot of people in my audience will be watching YouTube videos like this one, right? They'll have watched all the productivity content, they'll be following all the gurus on Instagram and TikTok, they'll be listening to episodes of Diary of a CEO, and it feels good. It feels good because you are consuming educational content. Even books fall under this category. And for the record, there is nothing wrong with consuming educational content. There's nothing wrong with consuming entertainment content either. You know what? There's nothing wrong with any of this. I'm just saying that if your goal is freedom and fulfillment, shifting the ratio towards creation rather than consumption, even if it's consumption of educational content, is likely to increase the probability that you get to your goal. But the reason I'm also including educational content in the consumption camp is because it's very, very easy for educational content and learning and research to fuel the consumption treadmill, the research rabbit hole where you're like, oh, I know I want to start a business someday, but I don't have the right idea yet. Therefore, I'm going to listen to all the business podcasts, and I'm going to maybe read all the business books, and I'm going to watch all the YouTube tutorials of people talking about how to set up a marketing agency and this, that, and the other. It's like, yeah, okay, that's all well and good. But the people that actually start successful businesses, they tend to be creating the business and producing stuff and making things, and then they are learning alongside that. I personally feel that consumption and education and learning should come on top of a foundation of action and doing stuff, rather than learn first, do later. It is also not just me who says this. There is a guy called Paul Graham, who's the founder of Y Combinator, which is like this massive startup accelerator in the US. And he has a really good essay about how to find work you love. And I'm going to read directly from the article here. Always produce. For example, if you have a day job that you don't take seriously because you plan to be a novelist, are you producing? Are you writing pages of fiction, however bad? As long as you're producing, you'll know you're not merely using the hazy vision of the grand novel you plan to write one day as an opiate. The view of it will be obstructed by the all too palpably flawed one that you're actually writing. There's one more quote from this, but I'm going to double click on this point over here right now, because this is a thing that I see in loads of people at my events and workshops and stuff, which is that you have this vision for this thing that you'd like to do, but you're not taking any action towards it. And in not taking the action towards it, you are doing a very clear thing, which is you are avoiding confronting the feeling that you might be crap at the thing. I've got a good friend who's been wanting to make YouTube videos for like 5 years of her life, like right now. And so far she's made like 1 or 2 videos. And the last one she made was like years ago. She admitted the other day, she was like, oh man, I kind of realized something. The reason why I'm just not making any videos is because in my head, I'm a really good YouTuber and I could totally make a living from being a YouTuber. But I know that as soon as I start making videos, I will have to confront the fact that maybe that's not going to happen and that maybe I'm actually shit at the job. And that's like a profoundly good insight. Like when you start out doing anything, you're going to suck at the thing, right? It's like the gap between what you know good is and what you'd like to be capable of producing and what you are actually producing. That gap feels really scary to confront. So if you're at this point in the video, the question might be to take an honest look at your life and ask yourself, in what areas am I allowing my vision of perfection to stop me from actually doing the messy work because I'm afraid I will actually suck at the thing? And you will suck at the thing. You're gonna suck at literally everything you start out doing, and you have to suck at the thing for a very long time before it starts to get even vaguely good. And that suck period, the period where your thing is objectively shit, is so it's so uncomfortable and so scary. I think for kids, it's fine because, especially if they haven't been had that squashed out of them, kids are just chill with just being crap at everything. But when you're an adult, I suspect you probably are if you're watching this, and especially if you've had any kind of success, academic success or professional success, it's easy for us, people like you and me, people who are very intelligent and very good looking, it's easy for us to get fixated on this idea that we're good at doing stuff. Like, you're good at your job, you were good in school, and now you try this new thing, in my case like drawing, in your case maybe it's like starting that business that you've never done before, or like being a creator or whatever the thing might be. You have to confront the fact that you're going to be terrible at the thing to begin with, and that's really, really scary because we have this ego image of ourselves as being competent and being good at stuff, and we have to let go of that image and just recognize that, hey, we just got to be producing, as Paul Graham says, we got to be creating all the time. There's another line from this. Always produce is also a heuristic for finding the work you love. If you subject yourself to that constraint, it will automatically push you away from things you think you're supposed to work on and towards things you actually like. Always produce will discover your life's work the way water, with the aid of gravity, finds the hole in your roof. When you are making stuff, and you're just constantly making stuff, and your ratio of creation to consumption is more in the creation camp, you will inevitably find stuff that you actually enjoy doing because you'll realize that you can't sustain this kind of creation ratio by doing things you're supposed to do, by doing the shoulds. You can't should yourself into making YouTube videos for 8 years. You have to actually, at a certain point, start enjoying the process. And the more of these things you try and the more like random stuff you create, the more you'll realize, oh, I actually prefer creating that sort of thing rather than that sort of thing. Steven Spielberg, for example, was randomly making random camcorder movies when he was a kid with his like dad's camcorder or whatever. And then he realizes, oh, I just really like making these movie type things. It wasn't part of some kind of grand master plan where he was like, you know what, I'm gonna break into Hollywood, I'm gonna be a director. It's like, no, he was just creating random stuff when he was a kid. And in that process, he realized what was the thing he liked doing. I speak to a lot of people in my audience who also ask the question of like, how do I know what my passion is? Like, how do I find the work I'm supposed to be doing? How do I find work that like I don't hate doing, work that I find enjoyable, work that I'm passionate about, work that I find energizing? If you ask most young people, what are you passionate about? They'd be like, I don't know, like scrolling and I don't know, like reading romantasy, or like most people, especially who are in the consumption end of the spectrum, which is most people I speak to, unfortunately, don't have a clear idea of what they actually like doing because they haven't created enough stuff. It's in the process of making things that you realize, oh, I actually really enjoy designing websites, or I really enjoy building electronics, or I really enjoy making arts and crafts, or I really enjoy writing short fiction. And it's the people who are spending a good chunk of their time making random stuff. Those are the people, Paul Graham says, and I would agree for what it's worth, end up finding the work that they actually enjoy. You will not find the work that you enjoy. You will not discover your passions. You'll not find what you were meant to do by consuming stuff. You will only find it by creating stuff. All right, so at this point, maybe you're sold. You're like, all right, cool. I want to shift my ratio of stuff away from consumption and more towards creation. How do I actually do this? I have a theory on this, which is just do, I call it random acts of creation. Just create random stuff. And there are 5 characteristics that I would recommend for the stuff that you create. It needs to be small, needs to be fast, needs to be bad, needs to be stupid, and it needs to be pointless. Small, bad, fast, stupid, and pointless. That is the guiding characteristics of the stuff that you should create. Why? Okay, well, firstly, it needs to be small. Small enough that you can probably just do it in a weekend, or a week, or in like, the Christmas holidays, or in the summer holidays, or whenever you take time off work, or whatever the thing might be. It needs to be small and manageable. Fast, it needs to be something you can make quickly. If you're trying to, your first random act of creation is to write an epic fantasy, it's probably not gonna happen because it's like too big, where starting with short stories is generally a way easier way to get into the writing thing and get into the creative act. Thirdly, bad. Well, it should be bad because if you are actively aiming for the thing to be bad, you are hopefully gonna avoid all of the resistance traps that the ego tries to put in place, where if you try and create something good, but you've never done it before, you will suck at the thing and then you're gonna be perfectionistic about it, and then the fear and the uncertainty and the doubt and the imposter syndrome and all the I suck and I shouldn't even be on this earth, all of the things that the mind likes to say, all of those things are gonna get in the way. Whereas if you aim for it to be bad, you're like, my goal is to make something bad. it suddenly sort of removes a lot of that like random crap that's associated with trying to make something good. So it needs to be small, it needs to be fast, it needs to be bad. It also needs to be stupid. The thing should be stupid because if you tell yourself that the thing is not stupid, it's gonna allow the fear of what other people think to get in the way of you and your active creation. Whereas if you actively just say to yourself, hey, I'm just making this dumb, stupid thing, it gives you way more permission to do something weird, to do something that your friends may not necessarily approve of, to do something that might be a little bit off the beaten track, if you tell yourself this is a dumb, stupid thing. And finally, the thing should be pointless because if there is an instrumental purpose to the thing beyond just the intrinsic value in creating the thing, that also adds loads and loads of pressure to the thing. So for example, my brother is 1 year younger than me, and when he was in school and a little bit at university, he decided to make random small, fast, bad, stupid, pointless, like 3 random projects. One of them was a website where you would just click a button and the number would go up, and there would be leaderboards of like who's clicked the button the most times. And this was, I think, the first website that he made. He'd watched The Social Network, the film about Facebook, and he was inspired to learn to code, and he realized he just needs to make this fast, small, dumb, stupid, pointless project. I'm sure he won't mind me saying that, but yeah, it was dumb, stupid, and pointless. This little random website called Clickfilia where you just click a button, and then there's a leaderboard. But that random tiny ass project taught him some of the basics of learning how to code. The next thing he made was another small, fast, bad, stupid, dumb, pointless project, which was called Speed Sums. I think it might still be online, which was basically a website where it would just give you like 30 different sums, like 5 plus 3 and 7 plus 4, kind of like the brain training, a Nintendo DS game from back in the day. And it would be a little test to see how quickly you could solve these sums. And again, there was a leaderboard or something like that. Now, I remember when he was making these random projects, our mum would ask him, hey, what's the point? And he'd be like, yeah, there's no point, I'm just doing it for fun. And she'd be like, ah, all right then. And that's very good. It's good that he felt able to make pointless stuff. The problem that a lot of smart people have, especially when you become adults, because again, adults are very used to optimizing for CV points and like what looks good on the resume. Adults are like, oh man, I don't want to waste time doing this pointless thing because I could be spending my time investing it more wisely to do this thing that might lead to something further down the line. The more you try and get your random small ass tiny creative projects to lead to something further down the line, the more pressure you're going to put on yourself to make those things actually good and to make them purposeful and to make them like meaningful and have a point to them, and the less likely you are to do it. If you're at this point in the video and you are concerned about your creation to consumption ratio, we just want to lower the bar for what counts as creation as much as is humanly possible, because chances are if you haven't started creating a lot of stuff already, which I suspect is true if you're at this point in the video, but if you haven't done that, it's probably because you're being held back by the bar for a creative thing just being way too high. When my brother was making random ass websites, he did not think there was a point, he just did it for the fun of it. And making those, this is where I was gonna go with the story, making these random small tiny ass projects, what that meant was he learned how to code. I'm very bullish on learning how to code, as you guys might know if you've seen some of the content. So he did all these like pointless, shitty projects when he was at school and university, and then he did a degree in maths, and then did a master's in like statistics, and then got a job as a data scientist at some company. And a year into his job, he was like, wait a minute, there's this clear like Monte Carlo simulation thing that we're having to use like Excel, Microsoft Excel for, but what if we could just build some software that does Monte Carlo simulation, statistical modeling for finance teams? And what if we could just like turn that into a startup? And that was the business called Causal that he started like in 2019. And he sold the company recently and is living a great life and stuff. But he wouldn't have learned how to code if he hadn't done these small, shitty, pointless projects. Doing those small, shitty, pointless projects ended up giving him the skills to then see and capitalize upon a startup opportunity like 6 years later. The other benefit of random acts of creation, which is what I'm kind of alluding to, is that they teach you stuff. They teach you skills. You never know when a certain combination of skills is going to come in handy. For example, if you were someone who played a lot of chess and you had chess lessons, and you were also someone who was making like random home videos with like your phone or your camcorder back in the day, you probably wouldn't have predicted 10 years ago that during the pandemic there would be a TV show called The Queen's Gambit, which would suddenly make streaming chess a massively popular thing on the internet, and loads of people are suddenly going to start getting into chess. You probably wouldn't have predicted any of those things. But if you had been someone who was like super into chess and also super into like making videos and stuff, you might have been able to combine those two interesting, like random unrelated skills to create something very, very interesting and now make a living as like a chess content creator if that's what you're into. For me, the stuff I was creating back when I was in school was like random websites. I was trying to build random websites, A, because I thought they were fun, B, because I wanted to learn to code, and C, because I thought, ooh, maybe one day I can make a website that makes money. So they didn't quite fit the pointless thing. Actually, a lot of them were pointless, like a personal website for myself and like forum signatures and random stuff, learning how to use Photoshop, learning how to use Dreamweaver, learning the basics of how to code. I could not have known that 6 years later, when I would get into medical school, those website design skills would come in handy because that's what allowed me to build my first business. I couldn't have known that 10 years after I got into med school, when I was working towards a residency in plastic surgery, I would end up meeting these people who needed a guide to design their website. And so that's what allowed me to get in with these like hotshot plastic surgeons who were doing like really cool reconstructive surgery all over the world, because I was their webmaster. I was just some random medical student, but I knew how to make websites. And so it's like this random ass skill, which I randomly learned when I was like 15 years old, ended up coming in handy 10 years later and getting me into this like network that would have been really hard to penetrate otherwise. And if you read biographies of successful founders, and if you listen to podcast interviews with like anyone that you look up to, and the host asks them about like what sort of stuff they were doing when they were younger, a lot of it is based around random acts of creation rather than just loads and loads and loads of consumption. Now, one of the issues that you're probably going to find when you start creating more stuff, especially if you do it publicly, and I would recommend you to do it publicly, because putting stuff out there publicly, even if no one reads it, even if no one watches it, even if it's a newsletter that you only subscribe to, even if it's an Instagram that has 0 followers, even if it's a website that no one ever visits, there's something about putting stuff out there publicly that confronts a lot of the emotional hurdles that hold people back from stuff in general, like fear and imposter syndrome and doubt and all the stuff. But what you're probably going to find when you start creating stuff and you put it out publicly is you might be familiar with this idea of tall poppy syndrome, which is the people around you, your peers, probably they won't care. But if you have a particularly judgmental set of peers and friends and people in your family and whatever, people that you work with, there's this idea of tall poppy syndrome, where everyone is sort of here and then you're sort of sticking your head up as the tall poppy and the tall poppy gets cut down. People don't like it when you are doing something that is outside of the norm. Unless you have a particularly supportive friendship group, in which case, fantastic, you should definitely keep them around. But people generally don't like it. And so there is a chance that you might experience some social backlash to doing creative stuff and putting it out there. And I think this is a good thing. This is actually a sign that you're on the right track. If you don't want to be like all of the people around you, then feeling their social backlash is probably a good thing. It's probably a sign that you're roughly on the right tracks. Obviously, don't experience social backlash by like doing something illegal or something like actively harmful. But if you're experiencing social backlash, if people are laughing at you or people think it's cringe that you've started an Instagram account or whatever the thing is, that's a sign that you are stepping outside of your comfort zone and stepping outside of the comfort zone of the crabs that you surround yourself with. My wife, Izzy, she like a few years ago before she became a YouTuber, she started an Instagram account because she got super into gardening during the pandemic. And so she started a gardening themed Instagram account. That's like an act of creation. It's like planting seeds and trying to get into gardening and, you know, snapping photos of it to sort of document the journey on an Instagram account. But somehow some girls in med school, it was mostly girls, found out about this Instagram account, and she heard that people were laughing at her behind her back, like a handful of people being like, oh my God, I can't believe he started an Instagram account. Like, lol, that's so cringe, you know, all of that sort of stuff. And it made her feel really bad. But she continued with the gardening Instagram account. Starting the Instagram account gave her the sort of confidence to then start a YouTube channel. Starting a YouTube channel has completely changed her life because now she has like 700,000 subscribers and is like able to live life that she wants and is able to make more money from YouTube than she does through medicine. The point is, when you start doing stuff, especially creative things, especially things that push the boat out a little bit, you might find that the people around you, some people around you, will judge you for that. Mostly they won't. Most of us worry way more than we should about what the people around us think. But if you have a very bitchy, judgmental friendship group or group of peers, they might laugh at you. And you gotta be okay with that. Because if you want to work towards freedom, the people who laugh at you are probably not the ones working towards freedom. Social disapproval in a creative context is generally a sign that you are on the right track, because you are stepping outside of your comfort zone and you are learning skills. And in the process of learning those skills, you will sort of skill stack to a point where if your goal is freedom, if your goal is fulfillment, doing the creative stuff is gonna make it way more likely that you'll hit both of those goals. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I hope you found this video useful. And if you did, and you haven't yet seen my video on how to get rich, maybe I suspect you might want to watch that because it's somewhat related to the stuff in this video. So thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely day and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.